timer started, so let's get going. Welcome everyone to the Smart Farm Network panel, and I think we're going to have a really good discussion. We've got an international panel, and I know we're going to get some great audience participation. For those of you in the audience who decided to come to find out what this is about, let me tell you what's kind of interesting in Canadian and global agriculture. So some of the key drivers are there's a huge demand for food. By 2050, 10 billion people will need to be fed. This is on top of the ongoing climate change that every country is seeing and the increasing need for adaptation and resilience. In many urban countries, there's food waste by consumers. In other countries, food waste from transportation issues. There is a consumer demand to understanding the origin of food, understanding the traceability. And so there's a lot of drivers facing Canadian agriculture and global agriculture. Compounded this with the rapid transformation of advanced technologies like AI. We see the farm being really a smart farm in the coming years in terms of adopting weather, precision sensors, the ability to do digital twins for research breeding so that we can test these in real live scenarios and reduce the amount of times from a breeding perspective. So there is a lot of exciting opportunities happening in agriculture, and we're going to talk about these opportunities because our panelists are working on this in terms of the Smart Farm networks. So when you introduce yourselves, who you are, what do you do, who's funding you, what are the types of projects that are really cool and exciting, and tell us what are the secrets of success. Go for it, Adrienne.
All right, I'll start. The Canadian contingent here. So I've been working with the Pan-Canadian Smart Farm Network for the past few years. In my role at Lakeland College, I am an instructor and research scientist there, and also the program head for a new degree program, Bachelor of Agriculture Technology. So we bring a lot of this work into the classroom as well. Okay, so the Pan-Canadian Smart Farm Network was I believe it was kind of the brainchild of Dr. Joy Agnew out of Olds College. And so she worked and rounded up a few other organizations and got together and created the first proposal for the Canadian Agri-Food Automation and Intelligence Network. And that is who funded us the last few years. We were the very first project. CANE is also funded by ISED, so we were the very first project funded by this new funding body, CANE. And it was a matching model, so I think it was 50-50 for us. I think things have changed a little bit, but I think it was a 50-50 model with industry matching and CANE matching. And we also, in this first iteration, Olds College and us and Lakeland College had some tri-council funding that we were able to match as well with it. So, and then we had some funding or donations, kind of rebates from private industry with some technologies that we all decided to adopt at the very first, the very first start of this project. So one of the projects that we decided to do, and I will say that the project that we applied for when we applied for it from CANE was called the Smart Farm Development Project, Smart Farm Network Development Project. And the goal was to try and model out and pilot out what it might look like to create a network of smart farms in Canada. And one of the things we did as part of our activities was a demonstration project between the three original network sites. So that was Olds College, Lakeland, and Glacier, no longer Glacier, sorry, Discovery Farm Langham outside of Saskatoon. And we decided to do a project looking at weather station placement and disease prediction models. So looking at whether the microclimate variability was significantly different across the field, how different it was from regional weather stations, and then how that might impact the disease prediction models that were happening on the technology from Metos. So yeah, that was our first project. We did it all together. We tried to set up a standard protocol, and we've been sort of collaboratively doing analysis, reporting, and yeah, it's just been an interesting collaboration and sort of demonstrating out all of that data sharing, who leads certain parts of projects on these technology validation projects. Yeah, so that's just an overview. And in terms of secret sauce, I would say that the secret sauce, from my experience with this network, has been relationships. So I like all the people I work with a lot, and we've built some really good relationships over the years. The network's grown to, I think, 8 members, I think now. Okay, I see Joy shaking her head. So that was one of our goals. One of our metrics was to grow the network by 5 members, and we were able to achieve that. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure. We have very casual relationships where we can connect with each other whenever, but we also have formalized collaborative activities as well. So that's been, I think, the biggest secret sauce for us.
Great.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so hi, I'm Trish Toop. I'm from the UK Agri-Tech Centre. I looked down at my badge because we literally are a merged centre as of the 1st of April, so it's not rolling off the tongue yet. So how we're funded and why we're here. So back about 8 or 9 years ago, the UK government decided that they really needed to help facilitate the growth and adoption of Agri-Tech to really sort of help SMEs connect and get that Agri-Tech ball rolling. So they put out a really big call and were overwhelmed with the number of applications they had, to the point that they went, you know, we can't actually just fund one of those. There are so many great applications. So what they did is they formed 4 Agri-Tech centres, each focusing on a slightly different area. So there was a data-focused one, there was an engineering-focused one, a crop and a livestock-focused one. And we sort of moved along on that sort of parallel sister centre pathway for quite a few years. And we had a review recently, and it was sort of, in those sort of 7 years, actually, the Agri-Tech space has become much more developed and actually a little bit cluttered. So our stakeholders were not knowing who to go to first, where to go to. So actually what we did, we've been on sort of an 18-month pathway, we'll call it a pathway, on merging 3 companies that started from the same place with the same aspirations, but developed really organically. So on the 1st of April this year, we formed the UK Agri-Tech Centre, which is actually the biggest ag-tech-focused business in the UK. So I'm lucky enough to be the delivery director in that, which means that I oversee all of our technical staff, all of our farm and smart farm network, which is probably what I'm here to talk about most. And I was really lucky enough that back sort of last year, I think it seems closer and longer all at the same time, to have a Canadian delegation come out and have a look at some of our farms and how we've developed our farm network. And I'm going to be honest, when we first started, we hadn't got a clue what we were doing. We just knew that we wanted to trial tech on farms. And one of the bids that had been put in was sort of to get baseline data of existing commercial farms as they were, so that when we could put technology onto them, we could see that change. Now, we made some horrendous mistakes at the beginning. I'm sure, you know, if you ask questions, I'll go into them further for you. But actually what we've done over those few years is we've worked out what's working well for us and what doesn't work well for us. And actually the secret sauce for us is relationships as well, but for us it's the farmer. So actually we need switched on farmers that if something goes wrong, they're not just going to ditch that tech, tell everybody that they'll listen it was rubbish and just leave it in the thing. What we want them to do is feed back to that tech company. Do you know what? That didn't work for me and this is why. And our farmers are brilliant. They are absolutely brutal in their feedback, but sometimes that's what the tech companies need, right? You know, and we're really careful in making sure that we don't get the tech out into the farm too soon, because we know that even with our switched on farmers, if we get it out there too soon, it will kill it. So actually, that's what we're doing with our network, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more about it later.
Thank you. So I'm from Australia. My name's Nick Pagett. I'm the Executive Director for AgriPark, which is a precinct strategy under the Sturt University, which is Australia's largest regional university and largest educator of agricultural science students. And we started our journey about 3 years ago, recognising that digital technology was right upon us, and that the ag sector was actually behind in the adoption of technologies. And so the challenge for us when we created what we call our global digital farm was that we took the challenge to saturate an existing farming operation with technologies and to understand how those technologies are actually deployed in a farming operation, but also how we could improve, eliminate the ones that aren't working, and then showcase those and demonstrate them to the farming communities in the Australian region. We run 5,000 acres of farming operations as part of our global digital farm network and our farming network supporting the university activities and research activities. Saturating a farm is a really interesting experience. We probably complicated the farm manager's life more than he's ever known. But it's been a really great experience because we were given the chance to actually put lots of technology in, understand them, the complexities of actually taking technologies from lab and putting them in to farming operations, and seeing how they scale from lab to plot to full-scale commercial operations. And we have that luxury in our operation to be able to do that. But with that comes its own complications, because we did that across grazing operation, intensive feedlot operations, into our cropping operations. And so we had a whole array of varied technologies, from climate technologies into beef feeding and production systems, fully automated feedlots, into our autonomous cropping systems, a vineyard of the future, which is being planted out now, which is a fully autonomous hands-free vineyard. So we really have taken the approach of saturating our operations with technology. But importantly, we did it with technology from the outside world. So how we're funded is that we seed fund as a university, very proud of the fact that we've got an investment pool for the university that enables us, in partnership with tech companies and industries and producers, to actually implement those technologies and test and validate them and provide feedback into the system. And our next iteration is really around how we build digital twins and simulation models to actually showcase how multivariables can actually be analysed, and every time we add new technologies we create more complexity, but actually showcase that to farmers. Our secret sauce, I think absolutely our farmers are a core part of it, because we measure success by adoption rates, and that's a really critical piece. It's not the amount of revenue we bring in or the number of technologies. It's actually based around how we can help translate that technology and get that adopted. So farmers are at a core, but I think it's the partnership we have with all of the stakeholders, not only the tech developers, but also the research agency and the funding bodies that actually support our activities and enable us to be able to demonstrate those to the farming community.
Great, and so maybe later, Nick, we can talk a bit more about that funding model. Sounds super interesting. And if you keep hearing CAIN, you probably wonder, what does that mean? And so that's Canadian Agriculture Automation Intelligence Network, and that the Government of Canada, through a competitive process, funded that, and it's a $50 million network, supports industry and government and academia partnerships, and more to come for that. And so it's pretty exciting that Lakeland is kind of one of the partners in this area. Trish, you mentioned a couple of the challenges. I mean, if you're up and running for a couple of years now, so lessons learned. What was the biggest hurdle that you had? And lesson learned, how would you fix it?
So one of the things that we did initially, so we wanted to go across the whole sort of spectrum of agriculture. So we targeted high-level farmers in broadacre arable, livestock, different livestock systems, crops. And we focused more on the ag system than we did on the farmer. So we went for connections that we already had. And we thought, we're just going to put a basic package of, we know that we want everything, try to basically do the same thing across all of the farm network. Oh my gosh, we couldn't have been more wrong. So we then went back sort of a few months later, and there was connectivity kit and computers and stuff still in boxes that had not been opened up. And we thought we were giving them absolutely the top end. So what we do now is we don't do that at all. We sit down with the farmer and go, so what are your aspirations for the next 12 months, the next 24 months, and the next 5 years? And what we then do is we tailor that offering to not only that farm operation, but that farmer. So we do have some standard kit, because obviously we want to measure things, we want to get that baseline. So we make sure that we have connectivity in on the farms. But that connectivity solution is definitely a one-size-fits-none solution in the UK. We're tiny, but actually we still have really rubbish rural connectivity. So actually, you know, somebody might need a Starlink, somebody else will need, you know, might be able to get some fibre broadband in, somebody's on a copper line, somebody else is on some like horrendous, you know, 5G Wi-Fi, you know. So basically we've worked out that we have to tailor, we have to be flexible. So that for us is kind of, I suppose at the beginning we were just really naive, and we come at it from a very tech perspective. You know, we want to get that tech across the piece, and we want it to be as uniform as possible, because we were scientists and engineers, and that's what we do. And that really was absolutely appalling and didn't work at all. So that was a big learning for us. So actually we're still, even now, finding bits and stuff in boxes, you know, that's on a farm, and you're like, that's a 40-inch telly that you were going to use for connectivity, and it was brought out during the World Cup, or, you know, and it went back in the box. So that's an approach we definitely don't do anymore.
Nick, what about farmer-centric approach? It sounds like that is kind of core to your approach. And how do you select the change agent farmers that are willing to kind of spend this time?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And like all industries, you've got your early adopters, and they're the ones that are constantly buzzing us around, you know, what's new, what's the latest, where's the data from it, how can I see it in operation? But the core is that 60% that sort of sits in the middle, that's sitting on the fence and waiting to see it. And one of the things that we recognise, and I don't think farming's any different anywhere in the world, in the sense that farmers learn from farmers. As researchers, we can't tell them what to do. As customers, they don't listen to their customers in being forced into things. So they've got to learn from other farmers. So we really work on a principle of having, you know, some really famous and well-regarded farming communities that then become advocates for the technologies and the adoption programs. We work closely with the suppliers of the technologies to support them in that. And that's a really critical piece. And one of our first and most successful projects, which was a startup that actually was an old student out of the university, was creating connectivity in pretty sparse region of Australia. When, you know, we're not talking about 20 kilometres away from a tower, we might be talking hundreds, if not thousands of kilometres away from towers. So connectivity was a critical issue. And now the ability for that partner, that tech partner, to now be actually scaling that, rolling that out, that technology in a commercial pathway, but based on demonstration and then based on word of mouth from other farmers, was a really critical piece.
Great. Adrienne, based on what you've heard, do you see a value in having international partnerships in smart farm networks?
Yes, Andrea, I do. I had the wonderful opportunity to join the Smart Farm Network, the Pan-Canadian Smart Farm Network, and as a representative and visit with Agri-Tech centers, and they hosted us and showed us some of their farm operations and the different models in which they work with farms. We spent about a week with them in the UK, and so I think most of us would agree that we're on that tour, that Agri-Tech centers, I think they're about 7 years ahead of us. I mean, they've, as Agri-Epi, they've been around for a number of years. And so they definitely had a lot of infrastructure and systems in place that we were very curious about. And so we really can learn a lot in terms of the operational models, the funding model that they have, and their service models that they do. And then even just like best practices, knowledge sharing around best practices. We also were very obsessed with asking questions around like, how do you get these farmers to like work with you guys? And so we had great conversations around that. And then one thing we've been talking about, so we've been meeting with Agri-Tech centers monthly, I almost since we got back in the fall. And we've been discussing a larger idea of, if there are startups, international startups or UK startups that are interested in trying to infiltrate the North American market, if they wanted to come to Canada, having a landing place like the Pan-Canadian Smart Farm Network, where we understand, as much as possible, the system and how it works and the kind of resources that are available that can be leveraged, and also the physical infrastructure to pilot out technologies and demonstrate out technology. So that's one thing that we're kind of tossing around in our meetings now and thinking about what that might look like in the future. So, yeah.
And I think from our perspective, we, not just Canada, we've been trying to do this across the piece. So actually, tech developers don't want to just stay in the country that they started in. They want to be able to expand. And as has been said before, farmers buy from farmers, but they don't buy from farmers in another country. They want to see that working where they are before they can commit, because let's be honest, this is their livelihoods. So actually, we've been trying to get the best partners across the globe to work with, because, all right, we can control our smart farm network, we've got boots on the ground, we can send people out to chat with the farmers, and that's one of our models, is sort of like, just having that person, that link. But actually, we don't need to do that in Canada, because actually we link with these guys. We wouldn't need to do that in Australia, because we link with those guys, and we've made those connections. So for us, we're a completely open book. I'll tell you all the things I've done wrong, completely open, because I don't want you to have to make the same mistakes that we did, because we've learned by them, we've got the bruises, we've healed, we've moved on. But actually, if we're doing something right that you like the look of, we'll tell you exactly what we're doing. And sometimes we don't think we're doing that much. We're just, we're going out and we're talking to people and we're trying to get that tech developed. But the international links are absolutely key for us.
Yeah, and look, one of the reasons we're here in Canada is obviously we've been really keen since a visit last year around how do we build a global smart farm network and connect the countries, and for a couple of reasons. One is, and we were talking this morning in one of the panels I was listening and hearing about, you get one season to test a technology in Canada, and we get one counter-seasonally down here. So, wow, what if we were actually able to connect those technologies and the data and the learnings and outcomes from those in counter-seasonal, the speed of which we could be evaluating and testing and hoping to, and supporting the scale-up of that technology would be great. The other thing is we're most likely probably testing and validating technologies that you've already been tested and validated in other parts of the world. So that duplication factor is also a really important piece. So as we've launched our journey around a smart farm network, we've now got 15 farms coordinated and working together and actually doing an inventory of all the things that they do on their farms and technologies they're running in Australia and New Zealand. We've started to accumulate some of those connectivity points into Canada and the UK. And a big part of that is just getting that learnings and fast-tracking technology, but also starting to think about how we can remove the duplication and potentially leverage the investment into our farms. We've all got limited resources. So if we can consolidate investment and support what's going on in each country, but then learn, that's the great thing about a network.
And Nick, you mentioned data, and in my intro, all the cool things that can happen on the farm really have to start with kind of understanding of data. And if you go to old college, you'll see how they're kind of manipulating, drawing, kind of understanding huge layers of data. Is it too complicated? Like, how do we bring it down to, like, a farmer's gonna adopt a technology that is not going to take a lot of time and energy. So how do we kind of distill the data readiness into the on-farm?
Yeah, it's probably one of the challenges outside of connecting to actually be able to use the data. The other challenge is, farmers have some great information and data, but they're being asked to supply that data to multiple sources or to connect multiple devices into multiple programs. So one of the complexities is, and our smart farm was really great. We had fantastic data. We developed really great dashboards. But then how does a farmer look at a dashboard and then make sense of his own operations? So then the data simulation and data twinning is a critical dimension to really make it real for the farmer around their own data, and to be able to simulate the impacts of that so that then they can test and validate it in their own farming operations. But we've also been really fortunate in some of our partners to be quite visionary in actually establishing what we call the Australian AusAg Data Exchange. And part of that is, how do we take single sources of data, privacy protect them, but enable accessibility of that data to be brought together to create a deeper layer of analytics independently managed. And you need an independent platform to enable that to happen. So we've created an exchange, which we're launching later this year, to enable data sources, and particularly producer data sources, to be used but in a privacy protected and a secure location, so that they only have to enter their data once, but it can then be matched and accumulated to enable the greater analytics.
Any other thoughts on data?
Yeah, I mean, data is, it's a contentious issue on farms because everybody thinks that, it's really, worth a lot of money or whatever, and single points of data really aren't. A single farm's data is valuable to that farmer if they can get insights out of it. But actually, from a larger perspective, from an ag-tech development perspective, it doesn't actually mean an awful lot unless you can amalgamate that and get some learnings from it. We're also finding with the ag-tech development is we're getting loads of brilliant sensors and technologies, and they've all got their own data sources. And actually, getting that data integration so that it turns from data into actionable insights is massive. And some areas are better than others. So dairying in the UK, there's some quite good data integrations from dairy. We're really struggling with some of the crop side. And actually what we're trying to do is when we're talking to ag tech companies, it's, guys, can you think about how you can get this data? I have my head of robotics and AI. Whenever my farm guys go, we're going to buy this new piece of kit, the first thing he says is, has it got an API? Can I get the data out of that? Can I get it into our platform? Can we make that into actionable insight? And that's the biggest piece. I'm not saying it's missing, but I think it's lagging behind the rest of it. So, and it's not down to the individual providers. So actually there's nothing in it for that maybe individual tech developer, but actually that's where we come in. That's a big lag for the sort of department, because the farmer wants to open one app and it wants to go, do you know what, we've got an extreme weather event coming up, this is the action you need to take. That's what they want.
So I'll add too, so me and one of the other network members, Emily Innovation Farms, we've been consulting with Kane and a contractor that they've hired to build a dashboard type of product that will support data collaborations. It's still in its infancy, so we've just been back and forthing, and they've been showing us some of the functions, and we've been giving feedback. How would we use it, sharing information among the network members. Now, it was great because of our conversations with Agri-Tech centers over this last year, we were able to meet with them just last week. They have developed quite a serious data aggregation platform from all of their network members, and they also, you mentioned the API integration, and they also, if a tech company wants to work with them, they can't work with them unless they're willing to provide an API integration. So they actually are, structured, demanding integrations, which I think is really cool. And the other thing we were talking a bit about too was like they're acting out data governance practices, which is quite, like it's a new space of how do we share data with academics and with whoever else wants it or asks it, and they're practicing all these sort of data management and data governance practices, and I think we can learn a lot from where you guys go with that for sure. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one more question, but then we're going to turn it to the audience for questions. So start thinking, please. In government, we think about sustainability, not just from an environmental perspective, but also from a financial perspective. Networks, smart farm networks are incredibly important. Not sure if the federal government or the provincial governments can continue to fund these networks. And so kind of what do you see going forward is the right financial model for sustainability? And Nick, you had a really, I think your model is interesting, so why don't you dig a bit more in that area?
Look, it's certainly interesting, but it's, I suppose there's always needing to be an anchor funding mechanism. I think that's the critical piece, whether that comes from a university, whether it comes from government. That really drives our model is a combination of government, university money that provides the seed, but then we partner with industry because we've got to get skin in the game from industry, from the tech providers, from the startup communities, but also the large scale. We've got a large array of corporate partners involved in many projects. At any one time, we've got 48 funding partners involved in projects and over 100 technologies constantly cycling through our farming operations. So that gives us some scale, which is great, but you can't do it without the core funding. So I think we are fortunate because the university has made an investment decision to back this model. It's a model that's scalable, which is great. So we've been able to really launch in and renew the program and extend it for an additional 3 years. Because that's the other piece is doing this under a grant cycle, researchers in the room, doesn't work. It's too hard because you might have it today, you won't have it tomorrow. So we need the surety system of rolling funding models, but we need to be able to leverage that because to make technology work, we need to scale that investment. And that's also part of why the global network's important, because if we can learn from what others are doing, if we can then find ways that we can actually mutually align, and we were talking to Cane Network in the last couple of days around projects where we could be joint funding but in separate countries to actually fast track the technology development, but also leveraging the investment in those countries and improving the speed of delivery.
I agree. I think setting up a smart farm network is not cheap and it's not easy, and actually you do need some central funding to do that. But then we moved into a model where we bid for competitive grants. So I suppose that is still government money, but actually anybody could bid for that. So we bid for, and we use the farm network in that as a partner within that. So actually that brings funding into our network. But also then we do commercial work with companies as well. So it is getting that skin in the game. And also there are some companies that don't want to do an innovation project where they have to tell everybody about the awesome IP they've just developed on your farm, right? So they want to keep that in-house, and we can do that with them. But also actually the one thing, and there's a little bit of a tension there when you go too far down the commercial route, is actually sometimes with the smart farms, it's having them as an independent voice, that they're not too embroiled in a particular thing. So we don't want to be a farm for a particular colour tractor, and that's the only technology we use, and all of a sudden we become a brand ambassador for that development. So actually that's one of the tensions that I have as the director overseeing that quite often, because I'll have my BD guys come in, so somebody wants to come and do this on the farm, and is that really the right thing? But because we've got that central funding, it allows us to keep that neutral, independent voice. But what it does also then allow us to do is bring competitors together in projects where they wouldn't normally even talk to each other in the same space, and we can have that development, and that's what we need to move that forward. So I think it always, has to be a balanced thing. But actually, I think We were getting close, I think, to getting a 50-50. But actually now, because we've become larger again, so we're probably down to an 80-20. But actually, our aspiration is to become, you know, if we've got some core funding, as we call it, that's sort of 50%, that keeps the people employed, that makes sure that we can have that long-term strategic vision, and the farmers know that we're going to be there in 5 years' time. That keeps that going, and then we can bid for the really exciting other projects that can be anything from, we've got one at the moment that is trying to take all of the chemicals out of robotic milking. So that's, that could be a really game-changing technology. Now, actually, we couldn't do that if we didn't have the farm network already, and those of you that have been on the thing, that's at the Southwest Dairy, so we've got loads of tech everywhere, we can measure everything. But actually, that comes with risks. Because, you know, if that doesn't work, that's a couple of sort of tankers full of milk that the farmer's not getting. So we always have to have some core, and then we can bid in for the exciting funding afterwards.
So are you on a 5-year cycle of funding, or is there anchor funding?
For us?
Yeah.
Well, we're no longer on any funding. Our funding ended officially, I think, about a month ago. So, no, but we're continuing our progress for sure. We still meet, and we want to keep going and continue the work we've done. But I will, you know, I think fee for service kind of work is important, but certainly, you know, coming from the post-secondary perspective too, we want to ensure that it's not just all a bunch of secretive and competitive stuff going on, right? Like this openness and transparency and including it in our curriculums and introducing this to students. You know, some of the companies we work with, I will get data from the research scientists they're working with, and I'll bring it right into my classroom, and we'll you know, do learning activities with this kind of information. So I think that's going to be a really important piece to balance that from our, you know, because our farm at Lakeland College is technically a commercial farm. It's called a student managed farm. So the diploma students take over pretty much full ownership of running it every year. So they get the experience of running a full commercial operation. But with that being said, you know, we want to be able to not interrupt those operations to a certain extent. We are okay with a lot more risk on our farm because we do have, you know, because we're a publicly funded institution, so we have some room for margins of error. But yeah, in terms of our network funding itself, yeah, we're just looking at some different models of how to move forward with that, and we've been talking about it for about the last year or so. So yeah, it's in the works.
Great. All right, questions, comments?
Hi there, Andrew Powell, Asia Buyer Business in Singapore. A question and a comment. This has been a great session. Thank you very much. If you're going to go global, you're going to have to work with 450 million smallholder farmers, who farm land totally different to you guys. Have you any idea how you might approach that? And my comment is, you know, if you are going to go global, I think you need to be talking to the development banks, the Asian Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, African Development Bank, because they'll compel the countries that you're going to go into with their grants or loans to actually spend money on specific things. And your thing could be one of those things that they make people work with or governments work on.
Yeah, I can start. So we've spent sort of the last 2 years really intensively looking at how we could sort of develop the smart farm globally. And what we do is actually, I don't want to set up a version of my smart farm because that doesn't work in other places. So we worked on quite a bit with Argentina, Uruguay, and Mexico recently. And what we do is we try and find sort of centres there that know what they're doing. So actually in Argentina, I don't know if anybody knows it very well, there's CREA. They work with a lot of the farms. So actually they know their farming system. So actually when you're looking at a smart farm there, you actually work with the people that know the model that will fit their best. And what we can do is we can take the learnings that we've had and we can go, this is what's worked in the UK. And actually if they go, do you know what, that is absolutely great for you, but that's not going to work at all for us, that's fine. We back off with that, but we know that actually the tech companies want to do that. We also worked with the UK government, so we've got the sort of the forward-facing people, and we've basically done some programs where we've worked with them to take companies out to those countries to have a look at the different farming types in those countries so that they can understand the problems that they're solving, because they might be slightly different or absolutely really different to the ones that are in the UK. So we're really aware that a one-size-fits-none approach, that actually we have to tailor it, and working with those different funds. And I'm going to be honest, from our perspective, I think it's going to be a slow process, because we want to do it right, and to do that we might need to do it slowly rather than do it fast and go, actually I've just made a huge number of different mistakes in another country compared to the ones I made in the UK.
Yeah, and great question, and I think the approach of, you've got to have a local partner that can support the delivery of programs and a smart farm framework in those countries. But I think one of the real opportunities for us all to explore is, with the skills, knowledge and data sets that we have across the network in a global context, it may give us the opportunity to actually bring in some different funding partners to actually help us think about that differently, particularly in emerging countries.
Thank you.
Hello, David Lamb from the Cooperative Research Centre called Food Agility in Australia. We run an innovation ecosystem around digital and data transformation of agri-food. Just to complete the wonderful picture that Nick presented, the collective, and it really is a collective of 15 smart farms in Australia, ranges from the youngest, the Global Digital Farm, which is 3 years old, back to the University of New England Smart Farm, which is 14 years old. And our organisation has worked extensively with Sturt University in priming the innovation ecosystem that our smart farms need. What we found is that our institutes and our colleges are not necessarily equipped to run or participate in an innovation ecosystem which they are actively supporting by other means. So the role of the collective in Australia, the Australian chapter, if you like, of the global network, is really around priming our smart farms, mentoring, training, rolling our sleeves up, even helping to co-design and build projects to kick our smart farms out the door in an ecosystem that they so desperately want to be a part of. So I'm excited about the cane initiative. I'm excited about the progenitors, but now the UK Agri-Tech Centre. And I guess I wanted to perhaps get the comments of our Canadian and UK partners here about where they see the role of their networks in that sort of that centralised capability building and growth space.
So if I'm just to be clear, you're asking about what our perspectives are on the central, you might have to repeat that for me. I don't know if I caught it entirely. It was a little muddy.
Do you see a role of your networks in helping the collective of smart farms who may not necessarily be equipped? They may be great at developing, testing, doing research, but may not be necessarily equipped to actually function in a co-design innovation space. Do you see that's part of the role of your network to help mentor and train and grow capacity in that space?
Well, I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, I mean, a possibility for that could be, I mean, we have, in our Smart Farm Network, we have loads of research expertise. Yes. And that is, we can look at models around farmer-led research or things like that, where it's more collaborative, not even collaborative, just really farmer-led, I guess, in that sense, when they are interested themselves. And we can support, I mean, any of us, I think, would be willing, us research scientists would be willing to support any kind of activities on a farm that was absolutely interested, for sure. And even partnering with like funding applications and things like that, I think 100%.
And I just might add, on the Canadian scene, like, while Olds and Lakeland are fairly engaged in the Smart Farm Network, Canada's a huge country, and I would not say it is equally, the notion of a smart farm network is an early stage, I would say, across the country, and that's kind of value of cane in trying to bring these various emerging networks together so that we're a stronger national network that then can kind of enable to seize the opportunities from a global collaboration.
Yeah, and I suppose from our perspective, we sit in between the sort of the university space and the commercial space, and it's that linking bridge. And I think that's probably one of the keys to our success is we have facilities on universities, so we work with amazing ag universities like Harper Adams and sort of Cranfield and things like that, where actually they've got that, we're getting those blue sky ideas out from the universities, but actually because we're a commercial company and we have that commercial impetus as well, we're a little bit more agile, we can help move those things forward. And we use the farm network. We take tech companies out on farm walks, and sometimes, quite horrifically, it's the first time that tech company has ever stepped on a farm. And they're like, oh, the fields are like, they're not as flat as I thought. And you're just like, oh no. And they're like, they've been developing a robot to go on what they thought, it's like a carpeted area. And you just, so we try and do that. And it's helping. And we've got this sort of, we try and do the full sort of ethos to be able to get the companies. So we do connections. So we'll connect companies together to help develop solutions, but we'll connect them to problems that they need to solve. And then we try and use the learnings from the farm to inspire that, to do white papers, to try and drive government to put the funding in the right place. And then we look at the growth and how can we get that growth of that tech in the right way. So actually people are developing tech that can be used. And then where the farms really come into their own is that adopt. Get the tech onto the farms and get people buying that tech, adopting it because they've actually seen it work and they can see that work. It's with our tame farmer that knows how to put tech in that we've actually got that relationship with. But actually if they can adopt it there, that can be adopted down the road as well. So that's how we try and do that.
I thought we were the only country that had startups that hadn't been out to a farm. It's good to hear. The amount of pitches that you hear from startups and they've, have you been out to the farm and tested it? And it's really important because that's one of the things we've been trying to do is open the farm up to bring technology in and make it easier for them to actually be able to come out and test and validate in a farming operation so that we can look at whether, worked in lab, it's not going to scale. Maybe you need to find another industry. I think that's one of the key pieces. You've got to create an ecosystem. And there needs to be a champion in that ecosystem in each of the countries, within each of the farms, and bring those champions together. And I think that's what really makes a network really happen and work well.
Can I just add one brief thing? I should have said it at the start, but I will say one of the goals that was part of our initial application to cane was, we want to make sure that no tech companies are developing tech that haven't set foot on a farm, right? So I think that that's a really important piece to get out, especially to this kind of a crowd, right? So there are, there's actors you can reach out to and get support in terms of that expertise and get some, real world context places to test out tech. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be scary, right? So we've got experts across the piece, everybody here, that can link you in and they can take you to the right farm, they can show you the right way to make that developed. It can make your technology so much better.
Hi everyone, my name is Kamal Shafiq. I'm here from Toronto, Canada. Co-founder of a company called Pagett, which offers field survey software specifically for farmers to not only self-report data, but receive rewards and incentives for sharing that data. I know, Trisha, you and I spoke at length yesterday, so excited to continue that conversation. But we kind of had a question around the experience that you all have working in emerging markets and low and middle income countries, since you're working quite internationally, and what we can learn in the developed world here from some of the kind of frugal innovation that we see. In our experience, we've launched a platform in 23 countries now, and not Canada, even though we're based in Toronto. So we're really here to launch a platform in Canada and connect with folks in the Canadian agriculture ecosystem. And we're interested in kind of understanding from your end, since we have the UK, Australia, and Canada all kind of sitting on this stage, what are some of the insights that you've gleaned from emerging markets and low and middle income countries that you've brought to your practices in all of your home countries? Thanks.
But then I think we should also ask you the question, why aren't you commercialized in Canada?
That's why I'm here.
I think one of the learnings we've had is there are different drivers in each of the different emerging sort of territories. So it's always to go in without taking your perceptions with you. So actually, if we'll take South America as quite a recent sort of foray for us, we had a really bad interaction. So we'd gone into one of the countries there, and we just kind of went in really naively. Again, this was a few years ago, and I'm going to quite honestly say before my time, thankfully, directing it. And we just sort of went in and we had perceptions, so that we've done this in the UK and this is how we do it and it works. And it really didn't. So actually what we do is now we go in and you talk to the people that know and you find out what the drivers are within that region. So actually get yourself a really good, solid, local partner, and that will make your adoption so much easier. It will, if you need to tweak to develop, they'll tell you how to do that. So leave your perceptions at the door. If you're doing it well in one territory, you might not do it well in another, and just go in with an open mind and find the best partner that you can in that region.
We've had some really interesting experiences, and it's quite unusual because most people think large scale, high investment, therefore maximum productivity. But actually when you go into some of the emerging countries, you work with small farm holders, they're actually, in terms of tonnage per acre, and literally it's an acre, they're actually, well in advance of what we're producing. So we've taken some of the learnings around how they're managing their land, even though it's small farm lots, and the activities they're doing, the crop rotations they're doing, the intensive management of that 1 acre, and trying to learn how you could adapt that into a 100,000 acre property on broad acre cropping. So there's a real, I don't think we should naturally assume that because we're doing it on a large scale, because we've got the latest technology, that actually that's going to solve all the problems, particularly in smallholders. In some cases, smallholders are definitely doing it better than the large scale operations. So I think for us, one of the learnings is what can we take from those locations, look at the data that they're producing, and actually integrate that back into our operations. And that's one of the great things about putting tech into different locations, is the ability to accumulate data from different environments and then understand what works in one region versus another, but learn from that.
Hello, Frank Johnston with Complexa Solutions. We work with a lot of startups to develop products. And one of the questions that we often ask is, what's the MVP, the valuable product that you can create that creates value for your customers? One of the things I heard was that can be hard with farmers. And the other thing I'm hearing is that financial sustainability is also hard. So I was wondering if you could give a few examples of projects that you've been working on, where you've seen success stories where products have been adopted, where farmers have been able to use it, and you can see a pathway to financial sustainability where they can stand on their own feet. So if you have a few examples, and maybe there are overarching themes within those, that would be really interesting to know.
I can start with one in the livestock sector. So this one's a fairly old one, and it was one of the ones that we failed globally with initially. So it's basically sort of weighing livestock in real time for the beef sector. So this company had an idea, and they wanted to be able to sort of weigh an animal as they come up to drink. So rather than beef farmers sort of herding their animals sort of on an occasional basis and weighing them, which is stressing them out and causes weight loss, they actually sort of developed this system that went into barn, and each animal has a tag, and as it goes in, it weighs them, and they get this sort of real life weight. And you need quite a bit of data, because actually, depending on what the animals' biologicals have done that day, without going into too much detail, you can have sort of a big variation on weight. Now, that was something that we helped through a few of the innovation grants to develop. That here is across the UK, and actually they can reduce the sort of time to put a cattle from into sort of market by about 30 days. Now, that actually for the farmer is a good return on investment, but actually now they've got some of those out commercially now, and they're looking actually, where can we go for the next stage on that? So they're adding sort of body conditioning scores with cameras and things like that. We tried putting that in South America, and it works really well in the UK. What we hadn't realised, it wasn't working, and they picked it up, and there was a massive python that had wrapped around all of the wiring and ripped it out, and we were like, yeah, that didn't happen in Scotland. So that's one of the learnings that we got from that. But, you know, from us, that was developed on farms with farmers. So actually when they were getting live feedback, you know, actually the cows didn't want to go in that particular area or whatever, they got that live feedback, and that was, you know, just one piece for us that's worked quite well.
And I mentioned earlier a company called Zedify, which is Wi-Fi extended in regional areas. And that particular program of work, we did a launch program with them, a project around how we could utilise that across multiple sites on our farming operations. And from that, they received investment from one of the large telcos in Australia, but also one of the large farming grain handling companies. And they're now off and running and actually producing not only rural solutions, but actually consumer solutions as part of the telco business. So that's a really great success story, and a bit of our pin-up program. The other one is, we find this often, you know, technology has been sitting on the shelf for a long period of time, you know, so battery-operated drenching guns, been around for a long time, but the single biggest limitation was they weren't connecting into the digital uploads of data around and utilisation of those guns. As soon as we were able to connect, and we've got a major project now connecting those guns to digital systems, into the regulatory systems and into the sales systems, all of a sudden it creates a whole new layer of opportunity for that company to be able to expand. But again, it's old technology, it's actually been around for a while. It's looking at new ways to actually enable that technology to create a unique value proposition. And it was a connectivity issue that really made that come to life.
Yeah, and I think it's a great comment you made there at the end, Frank, the idea of, you know, what can you learn from each of these that's transferable across, and that you can take to a higher level of abstraction and actually start to think about how to implement better in other projects. It could be a really good activity to start synthesizing some of these learnings. We should apply for a grant.
Absolutely.
Hi, Rob Syke. It's a great panel. I love, Trisha, what you said about throwing all the stuff at the farmer and they never used it till the World Cup. An idea that I've been throwing around in my head for a long, long time is what's in it for them. So what I'd like to throw out is the concept of a verified farmer. And the concept, there's nothing more irritating to a farmer than somebody calling on him to sell him something or her something that they're not interested in. So I always think about what's in it for the farmer. So if we had a way where the farmer verified their data as being accurate and good, what would they get out of it? And I propose that regardless whether it's viticulture or sheep farming or broadacre, if they could check a box and say, you know what I'm really interested in is biologicals. What I'm really interested in is remote sensing. What I'm really interested in is robotics. And if you could build that cadre of verified farmers that were interested, could you imagine the value to a biological company that was coming to Canada and said, we'd like to test our biologicals, and you go, bang, we got 166 people that are interested in it. This is what's in it for them. So that's just an idea that I've thrown out. Verified farmer, verify their stuff, but give them something in return.
I mean, that would be game-changing. amazing. I mean, we do it on a really tiny scale. We've got 25 farmers, but we know that they're switched on, and we know that they're interested in tech. And actually, we spend a lot of time, and let's be honest, staff money, having that interaction. So actually, when a company comes to us and goes, you know, I've got a biologic or whatever, I go, do you know what, we know that we've got a farm that will do that. And if we haven't, we probably know somebody that does. We've got sort of another level under that, which is what we call our farm tech circle. So those are the farmers that they're not the first adopters, they don't want to try it out, but they really, really want to know what somebody's doing over the fence. So they want to know what's going on. And actually, I was talking to the guys from Pagett yesterday, and I actually think that their software really might help with this verified farmer concept. It's, you know, can we capture what those guys really want? So we send them newsletters, we get surveys back from them. It's always a bit of a pain to get somebody to fill a survey in. But actually, if we can do that a little bit more interactively, if we can get that data off them really quickly, I think that would be good. And we've just started talking about, can we do this globally? You know, can we link the UK Ag-Tech Centre Smart Farm Network with the Australian one, with the Canadian one? How amazing would that be, you know, if we had one source of data? So I'm going to see you later.
And I thought that was a pitch for a product to start with, so well done. It's a great idea. Okay, so there you go.
We'll also see you later. Then.
Yeah, but also see Dave Lamb, who heads up our AgTrace program in Australia, who's absolutely down that pathway, and I can't agree more. That whole connectivity piece is just absolutely critical. And one of the learnings is, imagine if we had the ability to have, you know, 20 to 30, maybe 50 smart farms, and we're able to socialise a really great piece of tech across 50 farms as demonstration. That's how we're going to get traction as an industry. And that's really what a network really then starts to give us.
Mm-hmm. I think this has been a great discussion. We're going to have to cut it off. But I think, you know, next year when we have this panel, our commitments to have more global collaborations and partnerships, and we should kind of, how much have we moved in terms of the data sharing, the impact analysis? I think we should try to, the idea is great, but let's actually move to implementation. So maybe the onus is on us for next year's panel to talk about the implementation. But thank you very much, Nick, Trish, and Adrienne. This was a great discussion, and look forward to more.
Thank you for having us.